Say live. Okay. I want to welcome you all tonight, those who are tuning in and those that are here. So tonight we're going to do the liturgical calendar, the colors and vestments that we do in the Anglican Church. Does everybody have notes at your table that you can take? Do you need a pen? Okay. So we'll get started. As we always do, I start with a question for you. And so the question tonight is, who was Paul's companion on his first missionary trip? Are you ready? It was Barnabas. Acts 13:2. Okay, so let's move on. So I'm going to talk about first the liturgical colors. And those are the colors that we have on the table inside, and also what we as clergy wear during the year. So the colors of the hangings on an Anglican church's table and the stoles and communion vestments worn by the clergy are appropriate to the season of the church year. And each color is symbolic. So I'm going to go through each color. White is for purity and joy, and it's used during the great festivals of Christmas and Easter. Red, signifying the blood and fire, is used on Pentecost, when we have baptism and confirmation. And purple or violet symbolizes penitence and mourning, and it's the color of Advent and Lent. Now, some churches for Advent use blue. I know some of the Roman churches use blue during Advent. So, but we continue to use purple. And then we use green. Green is for life, hope, and peace. And it's used for the seasons of Epiphany and Pentecost. And black represents great sorrow, and it's used on Good Friday. And for those of you who have come to service on Good Friday here, you've noticed that the clergy we wear our black cassocks. And so here's a representation of the calendar year, Christian calendar year. Now the yellow that came out there is actually white. And then there's, I think the copy that you got looks kind of pink, but that's really the purple, I think. Lent and Advent, right? It looks pink, am I right? Okay, so that should be purple. And so those are the colors that we use throughout the year. And then the readings that we do are on a 3-year cycle. And so let's look at this explanation of the Christian calendar. We need to bring it up. It's right there. You're in front of the camera.
Let me get it straight. So the church calendar is divided into 2 halves. The first half starts in December with Advent, and it stretches all the way to Pentecost in May or June. And this part of the year tells the story of Jesus, from his birth and death, his resurrection, and ascension. And the second half of the year starts at Pentecost, and then goes all the way to Christ the King Sunday in late November. It tells the story of God's people, the church. And for the next 6 months, Christ Church is going to follow this calendar and relive the story of Jesus in a new sermon series. As any good story does, we'll start right at the beginning with chapter 1, the waiting. This is where we observe the season of Advent and wait with expectation and prepare for the birth of Jesus. As chapter 1 ends, we move to chapter 2, the appearing. This chapter brings news of great joy as we celebrate Jesus' birth and the feast of Christmas. We then turn the page to chapter 3, the manifestation. We remember the appearance of Jesus to the entire world, represented by the visiting magi from afar. The story begins its climax with chapter 4, the turning. This ushers in the solemn season of Lent, where, like Jesus' real desert, we spend 40 days in the metaphorical desert, pulling away from creative comforts to make space for God. This chapter is long and difficult, but the joy of chapter 5, the victory, is worth the wait. Jesus' resurrection from the dead makes Easter Sunday an ultimate celebration. Which then leads to the 6th and final chapter, the witness. Jesus' story concludes not only with his ascension into heaven, but with the coming of his Spirit, sent to create a new community, the church, to continue his work on earth. To listen to the church tell the story of the Lord is to listen to the Lord of the church. Reliving the first 6 chapters of the year not only shapes our worship, but it brings Christ into our very lives today. In Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany, it's as if we're with him in his birth and earthly ministry. In Lent, Easter, and Pentecost, we are again right by his side through death, burial, and resurrection. Living our faith through the lens of Jesus sanctifies our own lives. For his is an epic story of darkness and light, grief and joy, struggle and rest. It mirrors the tensions and complexity of our own stories. And through it all, we're placed right in the middle of the great drama of God's redemption of the world. So you're invited to live the Christian year these next 6 months. The ordinary season is past. It's time to inhabit the story of God.
Okay, so the reason why I'm talking about this is because there's a reason why we put these colors out, because we're following the Christian calendar and the colors that I showed you earlier on the first slide. It's just not nilly-willy that we put colors out there. There's a reason why we do it. And so we're following the Christian calendar that's been handed to us from the early church. And so I'm going to do some small videos now of each of the seasons, so you kind of get an idea of why we do these things. So the first one will be Advent, and that's the beginning of the year. Okay. So the season of Advent is a waiting period. We're waiting for the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, those candles are purple, right? Except they talked about one that was pink. Gaudet Sunday. Does anybody know what that is? It's hope that we're almost there. So it's the next to the last candle that we use that pink candle. We're almost at the end. We're almost there. Christ is almost here. And so instead of anticipation of waiting, we see the light. We see that Christ is eventually coming within the next 2 weeks. And so that's why we have the pink candle. And on that day, we usually wear, our chasuble is also, we call it rose, not pink. But we normally do that. Now, in the Roman Church, and not all the Anglican churches, they wear that pink chasuble. But remember we talked about the low church, the Anglicans? They just continue to wear the same color because it's kind of a protest. Because some people think that that's in the Roman Church, it's the Mary candle. Okay, it's the Mary candle. But it's the candle of hope that Jesus is almost here. His birth is almost here. So there's two ways to look at it. I look at it as Gaudet Sunday. I was at a church that was not allowed. No pink candle, purple all the way around. So it's really a preference. If you're more high church, then you go and do the pink candle. If you're more low church, then you do all the purples. Vivian, when you were at Good Samaritan, what was done there? You remember? Well, if Hall was there, it was all purple. Yeah. He didn't want a pink candle. But that was his prerogative. I prefer the pink candle because it doesn't signify Mary, it signifies hope that Christ is being born very, very soon. That's what we're waiting for during Advent. So that's the beginning of our year as Christians, the Advent season. So I think this year it's December, or is it the end of November? November 29th is when we start our new year of Advent. And every year it's a little bit different. So let's talk about Epiphany.
What is Epiphany? Epiphany, also known as Wise Men Day or Twelfth Day, is a Christian holiday which occurs on January 6th, 12 days after Christmas. For some Christians, Epiphany is the conclusion of 12 days of the Christmas season. Some even fast during the 12 days and end in an Epiphany feast. What does Epiphany mean? The word Epiphany means manifestation or revelation. It is commonly linked in Western Christianity with the visit of the wise men, or magi, to the Christ child. Through the magi, Christ revealed himself to the Gentiles. In Eastern Christianity, Epiphany puts emphasis on the baptism of Jesus by John, with Christ revealing himself to the world as God's own Son. Likewise, on Epiphany, some Christians celebrate Jesus' miracle of turning water into wine, also signifying Christ's divinity. How many wise men were there? The scripture never says how many wise men came to visit the Christ child. There were 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And some assume that there were 3 wise men, each bringing 1 gift. However, there may have been only 2, or 6, or 10. We just don't know. We also don't know exactly when they paid their visit to Jesus. They saw the star in the east announcing his birth, and they traveled to Bethlehem to find him. It may have been as long as 2 years after Jesus was born before they arrived. Church tradition gives the Magi 3 names: Balthazar, Melchior, and Gaspar. Tradition also gives meaning to their 3 gifts. Gold was a traditional tribute to a king. Frankincense was burned to honor God. Myrrh was a perfume used to anoint a dead body for burial. The hymn, We Three Kings, uses this understanding to call Jesus King and God with his sacrifice, reminding us that Jesus came to rule, that Jesus came as God in human form to show us who God really is, and that Jesus came to break the powers of sin and death for us by giving his own life for our sin.
Is anybody watching?
So whatever
Is anybody
tradition,
watching?
we can celebrate Epiphany by remembering Jesus as Lord, Jesus as God with us, and Jesus as sacrifice for our sin. Happy Epiphany.
Is anybody watching? On the... Now, in the Spanish culture, Epiphany is always celebrated, regardless. It's that first Sunday after Christmas, and it's called Three Kings Day. When I was the pastor at the Hispanic church, we did that celebration every year. Like this year, I think Epiphany is in the middle of the week, right? Coming up. But we would do that every year. And then what we would do is we had one of the 3 kings come in and bring gifts to the children. And so we would do that. So in the Spanish culture, the Latin American culture, Spain and those countries, they celebrate Three Kings Day every year. Where if it doesn't fit in our cycle, we don't. But I did it for 6 years. So, okay, Shrove Tuesday. Who knows what that is?
Pancakes.
Pancake Day, right? And when does that occur? The Tuesday before what? Ash Wednesday. So that's the start of the Lent season, right? Let's see what Shrove Tuesday is.
What is Shrove Tuesday, and what has it got to do with pancakes? The origins of Shrove Tuesday come from the Christian calendar. It's not the same date each year, but always takes place in the 7th week before Easter, the day before the beginning of Lent. The unusual word shrove is a form of the archaic verb shrive, which describes both a priest hearing a confession and a person presenting themselves for confession, which would historically happen on this day. There is a link with the expression to give someone short shrift. This means to treat them in a curt and dismissive way. The phrase originally referred to the short time when a condemned criminal was allowed to make their confession to a priest and be shriven, prescribe a penance, and absolve their sins before being executed. Shrove Tuesday is also the last day of feasting before fasting during Lent. This fast mirrors the 40 days and nights Jesus spent fasting in the desert before starting his ministry, as described in the New Testament. Traditionally, this was a day in which people would use up their stocks of fats and other ingredients forbidden during Lent, often by making pancakes. This led to the term Pancake Day being used in the United Kingdom, Ireland, Canada, and Australia. Similarly, Shrove Tuesday also became known in some countries as Mardi Gras, which translates as Fat Tuesday, especially in the US city of New Orleans. Ash Wednesday, which takes place on the following day, has nothing to do with burnt pancakes, but derives from the Catholic custom of using ashes to mark the foreheads of those confessing.
So eat as much as you can before Lent, right? So let's look at Ash Wednesday and Lent. Quick 2-minute on that. Okay, so the big question always is, what are you giving up for Lent? That's always the big question. And we hear, well, chocolate or something else, I don't know. Well, Bill, give me an example. What is it?
Pizza.
Pizza, yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
Candy.
Candy, right. Easy stuff, right? So let me just give you some ideas on what to give up for Lent. Don't buy anything that you don't need. If you can live without it, you don't need it. Give it up for Lent. Put the money that you would have spent in a jar. You'd be surprised how quickly you build up your savings. And be sure to look at how much you saved over the 40 days and put some into savings, but donate the rest. Throw away 40 things for 40 days. Every day you walk around your house and collect 40 things to donate or throw away. Every day until Lent ends. Try donating because you're helping others.
40?
40.
Every day?
No, one each day. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a good question.
But it does say
That would be
40 things to donate and throw away every day.
every day you walk around and collect 40 things to donate or throw away. Yeah. But one thing a day over a 40 period of 40 days. Or you could do that too. You'll really, really clean up the house. 40 days of home organization. Go a step further this year. It's a day-by-day cleaning and decluttering guide that lasts through Lent. You can do 40 tasks or just work through Lent. It's a way for me to free up the things that hold me back, material things. Be sure to give to others through donation after your organization. Here's a good one. Give up gossiping for Lent. That means you cannot do any gossiping, none. If someone says something negative about another person, either say something nice or don't say anything at all. You would think this is going to be so easy, but when you can't say anything negative about anyone else, you realize how often it happens, sadly. No eating after dinner. This one is hard for me, so it really makes me think about Lent because I can see just a glimpse of how Jesus struggled when he was hungry. I eat most of my snacks in the evening when I'm watching TV. Give up soda for Lent. It's harder than most people think. It's such a habit and routine. Say 3 nice things to your spouse and kids daily. You may think this is easy, but try to say things that aren't the normal thanks or you look nice or good job. Try to do 3 of these things during Lent this year. You could say, I love how you always help the kids, or I love how you work hard on your homework, even when it's tough tonight. You're a hard worker. Try to say this important word to your kids. Remember, your words become their inner voice. Replace 30 minutes of TV time with 30 extra minutes of devotion and prayer. Read a devotional or Bible story with your family and have a discussion about it. Even young kids can get involved in this. And let's do one more. Do not complain. We often complain and whine about things, but we need to try to have a positive outlook on things. You don't realize how much you complain until you give it up. And Philippians 2:14 says, do everything without arguing or complaining. So those are just some of the things that you could do might be a little bit harder than just giving up pizza or candy or things like that. So let's see what Pentecost is about. I love these 2 minutes. Okay, ordinary time. And so that's the time that we're in right now, right? We use the green, and we're in ordinary time until we get to Advent. Yes. So this is a quick video. It's about a 4-minute video from a priest who talks about ordinary time. And he gets into it a little bit deeper than what I said, but I basically said the same thing. It's a time of growth. And that's why it's green. It's a time of growth when we get closer to Jesus, and that's why you see the readings are mostly about Jesus and how we should live our lives with Jesus and through Jesus. So this is pretty good. I like what he said, so enjoy it. Ordinary time.
Well, you walked into Mass today and you were wearing green, and you've kind of been wearing green for a while. Why? Well, I'm wearing green because it's ordinary time. And so what's that? What does it mean to be in ordinary time? I'm Father Bryce, and we're today at St. Genevieve in Thibodeau. Let me tell you what it means to be in ordinary time. Have you ever wondered what Jesus said to his disciples when they were walking along the road, or when they were around the campfire at night, or when they were sitting down on the mountain and just listening to his teaching? You ever wonder what he showed them? There's a beautiful line in the Gospel of Luke on the day of the resurrection. On Easter Sunday, 2 of Jesus' disciples are walking to this place called Emmaus. Jesus comes up to them, like in disguise, and the Bible says this: beginning with Moses and all of the prophets, Jesus began to explain to them all that was written about him in the Scriptures. So what is ordinary time? Ordinary time is where we walk with Jesus, where we allow him to walk with us in the journey of our lives, to tell us his story, to tell us the story of the Bible, to tell us our story. Ordinary simply means ordered, or counted, or numbered, or in Latin just time through the year. So as we walk through the year, as we walk through this stretch of the late spring and the summer and the early fall, Jesus wants us to walk with him as he sits down on the mountain and gives the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Jesus wants us to walk with him outside of Jericho and past Bartimaeus, who says, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus wants us, like the disciples, to thirst for his word, to thirst for his precious blood, to hunger for his sacred body in the Holy Eucharist. And when we come to Mass during ordinary time, that's what we hear. We just read through one of the Gospels, through Matthew or through Mark and through Luke. We walk with the Lord, and we hear in the first reading what prophecies that Jesus is fulfilling. We hear in the first reading what signs and what we call types from the Old Testament that Jesus has come to fulfill and to show the fullness of their meaning. In ordinary time, we walk with Jesus through his story, through the Bible story, and through our story. So for us, for you and me, there's nothing, quote, ordinary about ordinary time. For us, for you and me, the invitation is simply this: to be with Jesus, to know his presence. If we're on the side of the road, like Bartimaeus, as we desire to hear his voice, like the first disciples on the mountain of the Beatitudes, as we want to receive him in the Holy Eucharist, we walk with him. We realize that, in fact, there's nothing ordinary about the life of a Christian. That every day, he calls you and me to enter into communion with him. A blessed summer and a blessed ordinary time.
Okay, so we talked about the seasons, we talked about the year, and he made a good point about the readings. Okay, again, we don't just pick the readings every week. The readings are grouped together, and they go together. And so, like he said, we'll read our gospel, and our Old Testament is going to show us how Christ fulfilled all that. So that's what I want you to get out of this, that we don't just pick our readings. Like some other denominations, they just pick their readings every Sunday. But we go through the cycle. Along with the calendar goes the readings, and it's a 3-year cycle that we do. And the Roman Church does the same thing, and so does the Orthodox Church. Because we are what? One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Okay, so what I want to do is clergy collar. I want to talk about the different uniforms that we wear, the clergy wear. So first, I'll talk about the collar, which is right there. So spiritually, it's become representative of priest's consecration to God and his role as someone set apart for priestly service. That's what the collar is. Some priests see it as a symbol of their slavery to God, showing the world who their true master is. And additionally, because many priests find it rather uncomfortable, the collar has become a way of performing a daily penance to God, offering up the sacrifice for the people the priest serves. But the collar remains a distinctive sign of the priest's availability and the permanent nature of holy orders. The priest is not his own and is a visible sign of Jesus Christ, present in the midst of everyday life, ready to reconcile sinners and bring souls back to God. And so we, in the Anglican Church, have 2 types of collars. One is the banded collar, which goes all the way around, and the one that I wear, the tab collar, this one. Either one is correct, it's just a preference. I don't like the banded collar because I feel like it chokes my neck, so I use the tab collar. But that's just my preference. So, the alb and the cincture. And so the alb and the cincture is the white robes that we wear on Sunday, and the cincture is the white piece that we tie. So it's a liturgical vestment worn in some services by Roman Catholic officiants, some Anglicans, and some Lutherans. It's a symbol of purity. It's a full-length, long-sleeve, usually white linen tunic, secured at the waist by a cord or belt called a cincture. So besides its functional role in securing the alb and stole, the cincture bears a symbolic role, signifying chastity and purity. And that's a picture of it right there, which you see us wear every Sunday. And also the servers, they also wear their alb and cincture. And so why do you think we wear that? Okay, let me give you an example. In, let's say, private schools, right? Catholic schools. What do they wear in Catholic schools or private schools? They wear all the same thing, right? So let me give you an example. Like in Puerto Rico, like forever, all the kids in public school wear uniform. And the reason why that happened was because they didn't want to have any distinction between the rich and the poor kids. Everybody was the same. And so we wear these because we are serving God that day. We're showing you, the congregation, that we're pure, we're white, and that distincts us from the rest of the people. It's our uniform, okay? We're not going to go up there, one person's going to have, like a Gucci suit or whatever, and then we're all the same. And so that's why we wear the alb and the cincture. Okay, clergy stole, and that's the thing that I wear over the alb. So one of the most significant vestments a member of the ordained clergy wears is a simple strip of material called a stole. The stole is the distinctive element of the raiment of the ordained minister, and it's always worn in the celebration of the sacraments. It's a strip of material that is embroidered according to the norm, whose color varies with respect to the season or feast day. It signifies the wearing of the yoke of Christ, the yoke of service. And that's what that signifies. And I really know that it is a yoke, because on the day that I got ordained, the bishop pulled down on my yoke. Make sure that I was doing things right. And so you have two. One is the deacon. He wears the half stole, and then the priest wears the full stole. And we have a joke that the deacon is only a half priest. That's why he wears a half stole. But it's only a joke. And then we have the chasuble, which is what I wear after the peace. I put that on. So the chasuble is the outermost liturgical vestment worn by clergy for the celebration of the Eucharist in Western tradition Christian churches that use full vestments, and it's primarily in the Roman Catholic, Anglican, and Lutheran churches. In the Eastern Orthodox churches and the Eastern Catholic churches, the equivalent vestment is the philonion. The vestment is worn by the priest celebrating or co-celebrating. Who can tell me what the difference is? Celebrating or co-celebrating? So you have so you have the priest that's actually doing the celebration, and then if a priest comes, they would be up there. Let's say a priest comes to visit us, right? I would be doing the celebration, and he would be next to me, or she would be next to me, and we would be co-celebrating together. And if you notice, what do I call Sunday? Do I call it a service? I call it a celebration, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're celebrating the resurrection of Christ and what Christ has done for us. So the chasuble originated as a sort of conical poncho called in Latin a casula, or little house. That was the common outer traveling garment in the late Roman Empire. It was simply a roughly oval piece of cloth with a round hole in the middle through which to pass the head that fell below the knees on all sides. It had to be gathered up on the arms to allow the arms to be used freely. And so what the chasuble symbolizes, it's the seamless garment that was worn by Christ when he was led to the crucifixion. And there is the chasuble. Now, some churches do not use chasubles. Some Anglican churches do not use chasubles. The church that I came from, we did not use them because we were in what we call a low church. I don't know if you remember, Hall didn't want to use the chasuble. Vivian, right? And again, that's a preference. That's a preference. I like to use it because it's something that we've used forever, but it's not a requirement. The Roman Church uses it. And again, each priest has their own idea of how it should be. Some of them come in with it at the beginning, and then some of them don't put it on until after the peace to go into the Eucharist. So that's just a preference. I like to come in without the chasuble and then put it on when I'm going to do the Eucharist. And then we have the dalmatic, which you see in the real high Anglo churches. Of course, the deacons here talked about wearing it, but let's see what a dalmatic is. It's a long wide-sleeved tunic which serves as a liturgical vestment in the Catholic, Lutheran, and Anglican, United Methodist, and some other churches. When used, it's the proper vestment of a deacon. Although infrequent, it may also be worn by bishops above the alb and below the chasuble, and it is then referred to a pontifical dalmatic. I don't use it. It's too hot. Oh yeah, yeah. And let me just say this, even the days that I use my bishop attire, okay, there's layers under that. And if I used my full, like I did when I got consecrated, you guys remember? I had an ob, a chasuble, my stole, I had a cope, which I'll show you in a minute. So I had all those layers, and then the mitre. So it gets pretty warm. And so let me just explain this before I go on, and you'll see it. You notice that when we did the bell, I used something else, right? It's the rochet and shamir. It's called the shamir and rochet, and we'll get to that. And then you have the mitre. So you have those two uniforms that you use as a bishop. So, like for instance, if I was to go to a church to visit, they would tell me which attire they would want me to use, whether it be the shamir and rochet, or the mitre and the cope and all that stuff. And so they have a choice of doing that.
But that doesn't make it high and low?
Not necessarily, because I'll give you an example. When we were at Good Samaritan, the bishop came with a mitre, but then another time we asked him to come with the shamir and the rochet. So it all depends on what you want. But it's still not low or high church. You know, for a long time, the mitre was out of fashion. Didn't come back till I think the 1800s or something like that, because of the Reformation. So it came back after that.
Doesn't it sometimes also depend on why the bishop is visiting, if it's for a special holy day or if it's just a visit?
Yeah, and when we get to that, I'll tell you exactly how and when we use it. But let's say he's coming for a confirmation. Okay, let's say I'm going to a church to do a confirmation. I would ask him which one you want me to use, and one is no higher, high church or low church. It really doesn't matter. It's what they prefer. Now, but you make a good point. If they're low church, they're going to ask me to use this one here, the shamir and rochet. If they're more of an Anglo-Catholic church, they're going to ask me to wear the mitre and all the other stuff. So it's true, yes. It depends on the church you're visiting as to what they want you to wear.
It's very low, obviously. And when Chris came, right away, Arlene said, he's high church.
Yes.
And I didn't know the distinction, so this is very good for me.
Yeah. So if you remember, at Good Samaritan, and Vivian and I are going back, Hall never wore a chasuble. You remember that? Okay. So now that Chris is there, he wears a chasuble, and he uses the very high church liturgy. And that's why Arlene told you that. Yeah, I mean, it's really high church. I don't think they have the bells, though. They don't have the bells. But we do the bells. And so that's, yeah. So that's a good point. Most of your low churches will ask you to wear the shamir, and then the other church will ask you to wear the more high church. Okay, so like the chasuble worn by priest and bishop, it's an outer vestment and it's supposed to match the liturgical color of the day. A dalmatic is also worn by the British monarch during the coronation service. And in the Roman Empire, the dalmatic was an amply sleeved tunic with wide stripes, clavi, that were sometimes worked with elaborate designs. It was a normal item of clothing at the time when ecclesiastical clothes began to develop separately around the 4th century, worn over a longer tunic by the upper classes and as the longest part of the dress of men of lower rank. And this is what a dalmatic looks like. So do you see the difference between that and the chasuble? This has sleeves. So basically, you have your alb on, and then you put your dalmatic on, or you could wear it in too. And that's what the deacons wear. I'd rather wear a chasuble.
It looks like if you had a hood, you probably shouldn't wear it.
What's that?
I said it looks like if you had a hood, you probably shouldn't wear it.
Probably not. Probably not. But that would be their equivalent of like the chasuble that a priest wears or a bishop wears. The deacon wears the dalmatic. Okay, so let's go to the cassocks. The cassock or soutane is an item of Christian clerical clothing used by the clergy of Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Anglican, Lutheran, and Reformed churches, among others. Their ankle-length garment is the literal meaning of the corresponding Latin term vestis stellaris. It's related to the habit which is traditionally worn by nuns, monks, and friars. In religious services, it has traditionally been worn underneath vestments, such as the alb. In the West, the cassock is little used today except for religious services. In many countries, it was the normal everyday wear of the clergy until the second half of the 20th century, when it was replaced by a conventional suit, distinguished from lay dress by being generally black and by incorporated a clerical collar. So, even in the movies, way back when, you see the clergy just wearing those long black cassocks. And in Rome, they still wear them. We wear them also, but not as often. And so those are the different colors of the cassocks. Like I said earlier, I wear the black one during Holy Week, or actually on Good Friday. The red one, you've seen me wear the red one with my shamir. When we did the bell, remember? I had a cassock on, believe it or not. And I have to watch because I can trip over it sometimes. So I got to watch my step. Okay, and then the surplice. Surplice in Latin, superpellicium, from sup or over or pellicia, fur garment, is a liturgical vestment of the Western Christian Church. The surplice is in the form of a tunic of white linen or cotton fabric, reaching to the knees with wide or moderately wide sleeves. The second Anglican prayer book of Edward VI in 1552 prescribed the surplice, as with the tippet or the academic hood, the sole vestment of the minister of the church at all times of their ministration. In other words, when they were doing service. A rochet being practically regarded as the episcopal surplice. And so I'll show you that. A more extreme reformers furiously assailed its use, but in spite of their efforts, Elizabeth's Act of Uniformity in 1559 retained the garment, and the advertisements and injunctions issued under her authority enforced its use, though they ordered the destruction of the massing vestments, chasubles, albs, stoles, and the like. So basically, in 1559, what Elizabeth's Act did was that the priests would use the surplice during all their services. And I'll show you. You'll know what it is when I show it to you. And so she said, so what do you think she meant by massing vestments? Massing vestments. So the mass, right? And so what the Reformation was talking about as massing vestments was that Christ was sacrificed once and for all, like I say on Sunday, once and for all. So the mindset of the Reformation was that what the Roman Church was doing was that they were sacrificing Christ every week, every Sunday. So they said no more massing. So that's why they said no more chasubles, obs, or stoles. We don't do that. No more of that popery is what they said. So that's why you see that during Elizabeth's time. And this is okay. So until 1965, the surplus had remained until 65, with the exception of the cope, the sole vestment authorized by law for the ministers, other than bishops of the Church of England. The surplus had been used by all who served since the Reformation. Now you need to remember, the Church of England was ruled by who? The king or the queen now, right? And so there was laws that they had to follow. And that's another reason why we had here in the United States what? Separation of church and state. Because when the Anglican churches were here, it was part of the English government, English law. And then when we had the war, that's when we said, no more. And I think I told you that when we went to Williamsburg, they had an Anglican church still there, and we read some of the history. And if you didn't go to church on Sunday, you had to pay. That was the law. So when would a priest wear a surplice? When functioning as an officiant or other worship leader at a marriage or burial office without Holy Eucharist, or at a committal that does not follow immediately after the burial office. The preferred vesting, in order of preference, is a white stole worn over a cassock and surplice. When functioning as an officiant or other worship leader at the daily office, or a choir service, such as lessons and carols. How many people have gone to lessons and carols? All right, so tell me what lessons and carols is. Laura, you know, because you served in a few of them.
Well, it's a service of literally lessons and carols where a lesson is read and then a corresponding carol is sung after that. It's a beautiful service.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and so.
Especially the ones they do over and over.
Yeah, definitely. And we used to do it at Good Sam too. Remember, Christmas Eve. So what would happen is 12 of them? I forget.
I don't remember.
Anyway, it's a set of readings. So somebody comes up and reads, and then we do a carol after that. And then after the carol is done, then we have another reading, and then a carol until we're all done. Lessons and carols. Okay. And this is the surplus and stole. You've seen that before, I'm sure. Now, in the Book of Common Prayer, the one we have now, it says that you can use this at a burial or a wedding, but they don't say whether or not you have Eucharist or not. So it can be worn, because I've seen a lot of videos from England, and they were still wearing the surplice and stole and doing a Sunday service in it. So I may just do that for your wedding.
You go do it at my funeral.
Is that what you want me to? You want me to do that? I'll do whatever you want. You just write it out for me. But anyway, that's a surplus and stole. I have one in there. Okay, so let's get to the bishop. So the bishop will wear the same clerical attire used by the priest during a typical Sunday celebration. And that's why you see me wear what I wear on Sundays. Nothing different. Bishops will specifically wear bishop's attire during ordinations, consecrations, baptisms, and confirmations. Okay, usually at consecrations and ordinations. Okay, who knows the difference between the two? Let's see if somebody else. Okay, so an ordination is for a deacon or a priest. The consecration is for a bishop. Okay, and then baptisms we know, and confirmations. We talked a little bit about last week or the week before, the meaning of what the confirmation is. And so those are the times where you'll see me wear the clerical attire of a bishop. On Sundays you won't. Now sometimes you've seen me wear the zucchetta. We call them a zucchetta. I was doing that in the beginning, but then I decided I really don't need to wear this on Sundays. But the bishop in Jacksonville, who was consecrated with me, he does. He wears the zucchetta every Sunday along with the same attire, only because he was a Roman priest before. So in the Roman church, they wear the zucchettas. The bishop does every Sunday. Yeah, that's the little skull cap, which I'm going to show you that too. So with the bishop attire, we see the mitre, which is the conical hat. The mitre is the hat that the bishop wears on special occasions. It's in the shape of a tongue of fire, signifying the tongues of fire falling on the day of Pentecost and the Holy Spirit. In the Church of England, the mitre fell out of use after the Reformation, but was restored in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a result of the Oxford movement, and is now worn by most bishops of the Anglican Communion on at least some occasions. Now, the Oxford movement was started by a couple of priests in England, and they believed that we should go back to a more Catholic church. And that all started in Oxford. And so that's when, but look at it, 19th and early 20th century. So before that, the bishops were not wearing the mitres. It was only until then that they started to do it again, because the Reformation was totally against all that stuff. All that stuff. And so that's what the mitre looks like. It comes in different colors. I have a red one and a white one. So it was funny because on consecration day, I was in red and John was in white. And so they call me the red bishop and they call him the white bishop. And my brother-in-law was even funnier. He sent me a picture of a red bishop chess piece and said, "You're the red bishop." So, okay, and then it's the cope also. In Latin it's known as pluviale, raincoat, or capa, cape. It's a liturgical vestment, more precisely a long mantle or cloak, open in front and fastened at the breast with a band or clasp. It may be of any liturgical color. And that's what that looks like. And Vivian, I don't think you got to see that much when you were at Good Samaritan. Because when the bishop came, he never wore a cope. Yeah.
Is that what Bishop Martin Sheen would wear on TV?
Yes. Well, actually, he wears a different one. It's like one of the short ones. Yeah. This is a long one. I probably should have bought it out so you could see it. But yeah, it's long. And so the bishop also has a crozier. So in the Western Church, the usual form has been a shepherd's crook, curved at the top to enable animals to be hooked. So I'm going to pull you guys out of your seats. This relates to the many metaphorical references to bishops as the shepherds of their flock of Christians, following the metaphor of Christ as the good shepherd. A bishop or church head bears this staff as the shepherd of the flock of God, particularly the community under his canonical jurisdiction, But any bishop, whether or not assigned to a functional diocese, may also use a crozier when conferring sacraments and presiding at liturgies. And so that's the bishop who carries the big stick. And they all are different. They all look different. Mine is different than John's, and so on and so forth. Well, mine is shaped like this, and it has a cross in it. Some of them are just actual crooks and hooks, and if you see these are kind of the same. So they're all different. It's the preference of the bishop, and actually it's the one who gives them the gift of the crozier. Okay, so Lori gave me my crozier for Christmas before I was consecrated. So that's why I have that one that you see.
And he loves it.
Yes.
I do. I love it. And what's nice about it is I can take it apart and put it in a box if I'm going somewhere.
I took it out one day when you were coming up, you asked me to come grab it. I was
Yeah.
looking at it, I was like, oh, it's a two-piece.
Yeah. And that's so, like, if I have to go visit somewhere, I can take it in a box.
You don't have to carry it on the plane.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that for? Well, you don't have to build it.
That's right. Exit stage left, right? Okay, so the Shamir Rocher I talked about. The Shamir Rocher is another liturgical vestment used on special occasions such as ordinations, consecrations, baptism, and confirmations. So, as I said before, those occasions you can use either or, depending on what the congregation wants you to wear. A lot of times what you want to wear, but because you're the bishop, right? Okay, and you've seen this, right? You've seen me wear that. I wore that on your confirmation. I wore it on the bell when we consecrated the bell. I don't think I've done any other things here with that, but we have a wedding coming up, and we'll see what I wear that day. But this is my preference, by the way. I like this one better. Because for me, it feels more Anglican than the other. But I'll wear either one. And so we're supposed to have, just to give you some information, we're supposed to have a synod in July where all the bishops gather together. And when you have your liturgy, your opening liturgy, you all wear the other. So that's a lot of stuff to take with me, but I'll do it. And then the zucchetta. The zucchetta originated as the Greek pilos and is related to the beret, which itself was originally a large zucchetto. It was adopted circa the early Middle Ages, if not earlier, to keep clerics' heads warm. And I would have worn that in the cathedral way back when. It would keep my head warm right here. So its name derives from its resemblance to half a pumpkin. Its appearance is almost identical to the Jewish kippah, or the yarmulke. And this is often considered to have been deliberate as a reminder of Jesus' Jewish heritage. It's an optional vestment in the Anglican Church, but I'll wear it once in a while. And that's what it looks like. And we also see, in the Roman Church, we see them wearing it all the time. We see the cardinals, the Pope, he wears a white one. The cardinals wear red. And then the priests can wear it also, and they wear a black one. But here in the Anglican Church, we use the red. So that is the end of the presentation. So I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any questions before we break for tonight?
I got a comment.
Uh-huh.
You know, you said the thing was a form of slavery to show you that you were bondage. That's what the kippah or the yarmulke was.
Also, right?
To the Jew. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It was given to him by the Babylonians. as a sign that they were slaves. It's kind of like the Star of David. And so they took it and they made it strength instead of weakness.
Right, exactly. And that's why we use this,
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
because
That goes back to the shack they would put on your neck.
exactly. And Paul talks about that too, right? So that's why we wear the collar, and then the stole is the yoke, because Jesus said, "Take my yoke," right?
And the clergy shirts also have color differentiations too.
Right, good point. So a priest and a deacon can wear the black shirts. They also have different colors they can wear. They can wear gray, black, blue, all different colors. Okay? And then the bishop only gets one color. And that's this color here. Now, I can wear black shirts. They also have different colors. I can, if I wanted to. I could wear a black one also, because I'm also, even though I'm a bishop, you're always a priest and you're always a deacon. Always. You're always a priest and a deacon. And so I can wear the black also. And some of the bishops in our communion wear black as bishops. So.
And some of these that you've shown, one time I've seen them when I came back from Brazil, and we went to St. John's, and when the bus came around, the first view I had, the bishop served me, standing in the door with all that on, and I'd never seen any of that.
And so what did he wear? The black cassock or?
Red.
Okay, he had the red cassock.
Set my breath away.
Yeah. Did he wear anything up here? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I got a question.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the Orthodox ministers wear a black hat. I just wondering with the little cross on the red cross. Do they
Uh-huh.
all have anything like that? Or?
No, just the Orthodox. Matter of fact, they have a few different hats that they wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Orientals will wear
Mm-hmm.
thing over their head with little white crosses.
Yeah. When we went to a Russian Orthodox cemetery up in upstate New York. When we went to monastery. Well, where was it? Do you remember the town? Well, we went to see the Baseball Hall of Fame. So we went over. We went to Cooperstown, and then we went over to the next town over, and it was Russian, and it was great because we got to eat lunch with them. They invited us to lunch, but it's pretty interesting because on one side is the men, and on the other side is the women. And so Lori got to sit on the other side with the women, and this is in the room just on the other side. It's not the same room, other side. It's a different room. And I totally enjoyed it because I felt like I was there when the apostles got together, because they ate a simple meal, and they read scripture. Of course, they did it in Russian, but it was great for me. And this was before I was ordained. We got to go, right? No, I was a priest already, wasn't I? Or maybe just before.
It was right before.
Yeah, it was right before. So that was a great experience for me, because I got to feel like I was with the early apostles before I was ordained. But they had different hats. They had the long hat. They had the hat you talked about with the cross, and it was really, really. And they wore cassocks, black cassocks.
Yeah, I was gonna say they love them.
Yeah, and it was a great experience. So I'll never forget that. So anything else? Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. Come on next week. We're going to talk about not the Book of Common Prayer, but we're going to talk about the worship service, the liturgy. We're going to do liturgy next week. So let's make sure we have our bulletins from Sunday when we come in next week, because I'm going to break it all down for you. All right. God bless you all.